When I was in Nirvana, I was the drummer. I was practically anonymous in that band. I learned a lot of things being in Nirvana. What to do and what not to do. And I think I apply those things to the Foo Fighters now.
Today we're talking about one of the most respected and misunderstood figures in rock history, Dave Grohl. To most people, he's the smiling, long-haired frontman of Foo Fighters or the powerhouse drummer from Nirvana. The belief is that Grohl had it easy. He rode the wave of grunge, reinvented himself, and somehow stayed clean while other legends crashed and burned. But the truth, it's darker, deeper, and far more unbelievable than anyone talks about. From a broken childhood to losing his best friend, his hearing, and even his public image, Grohl's story is full of brutal lows that most fans never see. And yet, he kept climbing. This isn't just about music. It's about grief, reinvention, and the raw cost of staying real in a world that constantly tries to break you. And in this video, I'm going to walk you through the full story. How Grohl survived Nirvana, built Foo Fighters, faced scandal, and kept performing when everyone expected him to quit. This will change the way you see him forever. Dave Grohl wasn't born with a silver spoon or a golden mic. His journey began in the rubble of a fractured family, where the silence after arguments was louder than any drumbeat he would ever play. At just 7 years old, Dave watched his parents' marriage collapse. His father, a strict journalist, moved out. His mother, a warm and loving English teacher, became his anchor. But even she couldn't shield him from the emotional fallout. The family moved to Virginia, and Dave was left to wrestle with loneliness, anger, and confusion. Music wasn't just a hobby, it became his escape. But here's where it gets interesting. He wasn't allowed to play it. His father saw drums as a distraction and banned them altogether after Dave's grades began slipping. One night, after a heated fight, Dave ran to his room and wrote a letter saying he was leaving home. It wasn't just teenage rebellion. It was a quiet declaration of war between the life expected of him and the one he knew he had to fight for. But that's not all. Dave didn't take formal lessons. No teachers, no classes, just instinct. He locked himself in his room with a cassette player and mimicked his heroes. Neil Peart from Rush, John Bonham from Led Zeppelin. He'd rewind each beat 100 times if that's what it took. And when he tattooed Bonham's three-circle symbol on his arm at 17, it wasn't for style, it was a promise. Hold that thought, because it connects to something even crazier. The same kid who was told he'd never make it would soon be playing drums so loud, so explosive, that they'd echo through the halls of music history. Dave Grohl's first big break didn't come from talent alone. It came from a lie. A bold, reckless lie that would change the course of his entire life. In 1985, Grohl's first band, Mission Impossible, dissolved. He was just a teenager, but already obsessed with one goal: getting on stage and staying there. That's when he heard Scream, a respected punk band in Washington, D.C., needed a drummer. Without hesitation, he showed up to the audition. There was just one problem. He was 17, not old enough to tour. So he looked the band in the eye and said, "I'm 20. You won't believe what happens next." That lie didn't just get him the gig, it launched him into 4 years of non-stop touring. No school, no backup plan, just a van, a kit, and a dream. With Scream, Dave learned how to survive, crashing on floors, eating from gas stations, setting up gear in freezing back alleys. But he didn't complain, because every night, when he sat behind the drums, he felt something most people never feel in a lifetime: purpose. But that's just the beginning. Grohl didn't just keep up, he stood out. His style was raw, thunderous, full of instinct. He didn't read music, he felt it, and people noticed. In grimy clubs across Europe, word spread, "Who's that kid behind the kit?" He wasn't the face of the band, not yet, but he was becoming something even more powerful, a force. Now here's the twist. That underground grind, those sleepless tours, the blood on his knuckles from drumming too hard, it was all leading to one phone call. One that would catapult him into a band called Nirvana, and a level of fame he never saw coming. One phone call. That's all it took to launch Dave Grohl from the punk trenches into the stratosphere of rock history. But what happened next was far from a fairy tale. It was 1990. Dave was still reeling after Scream suddenly broke up mid-tour. The band's bassist had quit without warning, and for a moment, it felt like everything Dave had sacrificed, school, home, security, had led to a dead end. But then the phone rang. It was Buzz Osborne of the Melvins, a friend of Kurt Cobain, who told him Nirvana was looking for a drummer. No promises, no guarantees, just a shot in the dark. But here's where it gets wild. Kurt and Chris watched Dave play one set, and that was it. No second auditions, no debates. Dave Grohl was in. The kid who had lied his way into Scream had now landed in Nirvana, the band that would soon redefine an entire generation. What happened next will shock you. Within a year, Nevermind dropped. Smells Like Teen Spirit exploded like a cultural bomb. MTV couldn't stop playing it. Malls echoed with its angst. And Dave? He wasn't just drumming, he was detonating. His explosive beats became the pulse of the grunge revolution. He hit like a storm, filling every venue with thunder. But, hold on, because things were about to spiral. Dave had only just found his footing in this massive new world, but behind the scenes, Kurt was unraveling. And what began as the rise of a band was about to become a tragedy that would haunt Grohl for the rest of his life. At 25, Dave Grohl had everything: fame, money, a place in the most influential rock band on earth. But in one devastating moment, it all came crashing down, and it shattered him so completely he nearly walked away from music forever. It was April 1994. Nirvana had just wrapped a tour in Europe. Kurt Cobain was visibly struggling, sick, fragile, unraveling. On March 1st, they played their last show in Munich, not knowing it would be the final time they'd share a stage. Just weeks later, Kurt was gone. A shotgun, a note, and a silence that still echoes today. When Dave got the news, he didn't cry, he didn't scream, he just went completely numb. But listen to this. He turned down every offer, every band. Even Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers invited him to join after a televised performance. He said no. Why? Because music, the one thing that had always saved him, now felt like the very thing that betrayed him. In a 2013 speech, he admitted, "When Kurt died, I was lost. Music broke my heart." That's when things took an unexpected turn. Instead of chasing another spotlight, Grohl retreated into the shadows. Alone in a studio, he recorded dozens of songs he'd written in secret, playing every instrument himself: guitar, bass, drums, vocals. No label, no PR, just pain, bottled up and poured into sound. And here's the kicker. He called it Foo Fighters, a name meant to hide his identity. But those recordings, they exploded. Radio stations couldn't get enough, and what began as a one-man healing project was about to become one of the biggest rock bands in the world. Foo Fighters wasn't born in a boardroom. It was born in a basement, out of grief, with no master plan. Just one man trying to heal through music. But what happened next? No one saw it coming. After the unexpected buzz from his solo recordings, Dave Grohl did something wild. He turned his raw, emotional demo tape into a band. He brought in Pat Smear, his old bandmate from Nirvana, plus Nate Mendel on bass, and William Goldsmith on drums. It should have been simple, but building a new band from the ashes of Nirvana, that's like trying to light a match in the middle of a storm. But here's where it gets crazier. While recording Foo Fighters' second album, The Color and the Shape, Dave secretly re-recorded all of Goldsmith's drum parts without telling him. The move sparked outrage. Goldsmith left the band, and critics labeled Dave a control freak. But Grohl didn't flinch. To him, it wasn't about ego, it was about standards. "The music has to be right," he later said, "even if it costs me friendships." And that's just the beginning. The band pushed forward. Album after album, hit after hit, Everlong, My Hero, Best of You. The Foo Fighters weren't just surviving, they were dominating. And through it all, Dave wasn't just playing drums anymore. He was leading, singing, writing, reinventing himself with every chord. Stick with me, because what happened next would test him more than any breakup, any betrayal, or any career setback. A second soulmate was about to walk into his life, and years later, that same soulmate would be gone in an instant. Dave Grohl didn't just find a bandmate in Taylor Hawkins. He found a brother, a musical soulmate, someone who made the stage feel like home again. But that bond, built over 25 years of laughter, sweat, and sound, would end in the most heartbreaking way imaginable. Taylor Hawkins joined Foo Fighters in 1997, stepping into the chaos with a grin that matched Dave's energy beat for beat. They were magic together, on stage and off. Fans felt it. The synergy, the joy, the fire. Interviews turned into comedy skits. Tours felt like road trips with your best friend. And in private, they had each other's backs through everything. Dave once said, "We didn't need to talk, we just understood." But then, it took a dark turn. On March 25th, 2022, while on tour in Colombia, Taylor Hawkins was found dead. No warning, no goodbye, just silence. The Foo Fighters canceled everything. No flashy press releases, no rushed tributes, just mourning. You need to hear this part, because Dave didn't just lose his drummer. He lost a piece of himself. They weren't just bandmates, they were family. And in the months that followed, Dave didn't scream or rage. He went inward. And what came out was an album. But here we are, a record soaked in grief and love, written not for the charts, but for the dead. And the most emotional track? The Teacher, written after losing his mother Virginia just a year later. One loss after another, back-to-back heartbreaks. But instead of collapsing, Dave did what he's always done. He picked up a guitar and played for the ones who couldn't anymore. Dave Grohl had always seemed untouchable. Rock's nice guy, the devoted father, the grieving friend. But in late 2024, a truth surfaced that shattered that image and forced him to face the world in a way most stars never dare. The news broke quietly at first, a whisper in the tabloids. Then headlines roared. Dave Grohl had fathered a daughter from an extramarital relationship. No leaks, no paparazzi chases, just a single, sincere statement from Dave himself confirming it was true. And just like that, the man who had survived so many personal tragedies was now staring down public scrutiny, not as a rock legend, but as a flawed man. But here's the twist. He didn't run. No PR team. No lawyer-crafted apology. Just honesty. He owned his mistake and committed to being present in both families' lives. It wasn't about saving face. It was about doing what was right. In a world where image often matters more than truth, Grohl chose truth, even if it cost him his reputation. And it gets deeper. Foo Fighters canceled their 2025 South American and Asian tours. No explanation. No excuses. But insiders said it was Dave's call. He needed time to stabilize his personal life, to be a father, to be present, not just to the daughter he raised, but to the one he never expected. Stick with me, because even though the stage went dark, Grohl's legacy didn't fade. In fact, what he did next would be one of the most beautiful moments in his entire career. After decades of roaring crowds, blazing lights, and emotional storms, Dave Grohl returned to the stage in a way no one expected. Not with pyrotechnics, not with hype, but with something far more powerful: his family. In 2024, Foo Fighters launched the Everything or Nothing at All tour, a tribute to both Taylor Hawkins and Dave's late mother, Virginia. The shows weren't just concerts, they were memorials wrapped in melody. But one night in London, everything changed. Fans watched, stunned, as Dave stepped aside during the song "Show Me How," and his eldest daughter, Violet, walked up to the mic. But listen to this. She didn't just sing, she owned it. Her voice, strong yet haunting, echoed across the stadium like a passing of the torch. Standing beside her father, she wasn't just performing. She was continuing the legacy of a family stitched together by rhythm and resilience. And it gets even more incredible. During the encore, Shane Hawkins, Taylor's son, took the drums. His hair flying, his face locked in focus, he channeled his father with every beat. It wasn't a tribute, it was a resurrection. For one night, the ghosts of Foo Fighters' past stood proudly on that stage, breathing through their children. You won't believe what this moment meant to fans. It wasn't about nostalgia, it was a ritual, a reminder that music is more than sound. It's bloodline, it's memory, it's healing. And in that moment, Dave Grohl wasn't just a rock star. He was a father, a mentor, and a living symbol of everything music can carry through time. Most people didn't notice it at first. The subtle lean toward the sound engineer, the way Dave Grohl tilted his head mid-song. But behind the noise, behind the fame, something was breaking, silently, permanently. Dave Grohl was losing his hearing. Years of playing on deafening stages, without proper protection, had finally caught up with him. The constant ringing, the muffled voices, the inability to hear in crowded rooms. It wasn't just annoying, it was terrifying. Tinnitus had become his unwanted companion, and in one ear, he was nearly deaf. But here's where it gets crazier. Instead of stepping back, he adjusted. Dave had custom sound systems built for live shows just so he could feel the rhythm he could no longer clearly hear. He kept going, not because he had to, but because he couldn't imagine doing anything else. "Music is how I understand the world," he once said. "If I lose that, I lose part of myself." And you won't believe what happened next. In April 2025, Grohl shocked fans by appearing at Coachella, not with Foo Fighters, but with the Los Angeles Philharmonic. Together, they performed orchestral versions of Everlong and The Sky is a Neighborhood. It was breathtaking, emotional, raw. Not the screaming rebel from the 90s, but a seasoned soul still refusing to be silenced. Stick with me, because even as the volume faded, the emotion only got louder. And what Dave did next would prove once and for all that legends aren't made in studios or stadiums. They're forged in the fire of everything life tries to take away, and still standing. Most legends burn fast and disappear. But Dave Grohl? He just kept going, through heartbreak, scandal, loss, and even silence. He didn't rise because he was the best. He rose because he never stopped moving forward. From a kid banging on cassette players in a broken home, to the thunder behind Nirvana, to building Foo Fighters from scratch, Grohl's life reads like a survival manual written in power chords. He's not the greatest vocalist. He's not the most technically advanced drummer. But what makes him unforgettable is what he did after the spotlight turned harsh. When Kurt died, he built something new. When Taylor passed, he honored him in sound. When his mother left this world, he wrote The Teacher. Not for fame, but for her. But here's the part that hits hardest. Grohl doesn't ask to be called a legend. He never chases awards or headlines. He shows up. Bleeding fingers, broken leg, deaf ear. He shows up. And in a music world of trends, scandals, and auto-tuned hype, that's more radical than ever. And the reason that matters? Because generations are now watching him and his daughter share the stage. Kids who weren't even born when Everlong was released are screaming those lyrics back to him, not because he stayed relevant, but because he stayed real. So if you ask, what really happened to Dave Grohl, here's your answer. He lived, fully, honestly, loudly. And in doing so, he didn't just make music, he made meaning. And that's why he'll never be forgotten.